Felicitous greetings, fellow fanatics. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Adam the Fanatic, and I'm afraid that there is a slight change to the schedule. While I will still be looking at The Girl from Arcania next week, this week we are not doing Flashpoint Lacey the Flame. Although I'm feeling a lot better than I was last week, I do still have a bit of a cold and my throat is sore. So I've opted to do a shorter video this week and take a look at the game that started the Metroidvania genre, The Legend of Zelda for the NES. First released in 1986 for the Famicom Disk System, a floppy drive-like attachment that was placed underneath the original Famicom, The Legend of Zelda The Hyrule Fantasy was a massive undertaking for its time. A year and a half later, with cartridge technology rapidly advancing, Nintendo was able to use battery-based memory systems to allow cartridges themselves to save. This meant that even though the disc system never released outside of Japan, we Westerners could enjoy it as well. Dropping the subtitle, the Western release was simply known as The Legend of Zelda, and its effect on the industry certainly would prove to be legendary in the decades to come. It's not only one of the foundational titles of Metroidvanias, but of the entire action-adventure genre as a whole. Going on to sell over 6.5 million copies, it was one of the NES's 10 best-selling titles, and has since been ported to the GameCube, Game Boy Advance, Wii, Wii U, 3DS, Switch, and Switch 2. I myself will be using a ROM that I ripped from my Ambassador 3DS. In The Legend of Zelda, you'll take on the role of Link, a young boy who has just saved Impa from a band of roving monsters in the land of Hyrule. Like many games of the era, most of Zelda's backstory is told through the manual rather than the game itself. Impa reveals that she is a handmaid of Princess Zelda, who has been captured by the vicious demon Ganon. She tells Link that it's his destiny to seek out the 8 shards of the Triforce of Wisdom and use it to confront Ganon, who himself controls the Triforce of Power. For those of you who jumped into the series later, you won't hear the Triforce of Courage until the sequel. Pursuant to that quest, you'll have to travel around Hyrule and collect the pieces of the Triforce, starting out with a little more than a wooden sword. Your sword is permanently bound to the B button, which allows you to swing it as a short-range attack. If you're at full health, you'll shoot a beam from your sword which deals the same damage as the blade itself. You'll also have a buckler which Link automatically holds, protecting him from weak projectiles in front of him as long as he's not using anything else. You can later purchase a large shield, which will block most non-boss projectiles. And honestly, it feels like a necessity in the late game when you're battling hordes of Wizropes. But the key to Legend of Zelda isn't in what Link starts with, but in exploring and upgrading your equipment. Without ever entering a dungeon, you can find bombs to blow up certain walls and find hidden entrances, and you can amass a fair bit of wealth if you know where to look. With that, you can buy quite a few things to prepare you for the early game if you want an easier time. This includes the blue candle to burn bushes, the bait to lure enemies away. Does anyone actually use that? If you really hoard your rupees, you can even buy the blue ring to have all damage that you take. But eventually, you'll have to venture to the game's dungeons. Inside each dungeon, you'll not only fight against hordes of monsters, but you'll also be able to find a map that shows you the layout of the dungeon, the compass, which shows where the Triforce shard is hidden, and at least one item unique to that dungeon. In the first dungeon, you can find both the bow, which is useless unless you bought the arrows already, and the boomerang, a short-range projectile that can only harm the weakest of enemies, but will stun most others, making it much easier to deal with them. It's honestly my go-to secondary item for the first half of the game or so, until Dark Nuts and Wizropes become common. At the end of each dungeon, you'll battle against a boss. Defeat them, you'll gain a heart container, giving you more health for future battles. And of course, the essential Triforce shard that you came here for. Not every item is necessary. The red candle is actually pretty useless once you know where the bushes are flammable. And the magic rod, well, it's useless in the first quest at least, but more on that in a moment. Over the last few years, I've heard rumors going around that this title is an open world game, and some have even been comparing it to the reboots Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. However, this take is uninformed, if not outright deceptive. While the overworld was quite large for its time, it really only takes a few minutes to get from one corner of the map to the other. But perhaps more importantly is the fact that while some dungeons can be played out of order, they're clearly labeled Level 1, Level 2, and so forth until the 9th and final dungeon. Beyond that, some of these must be done in order. You need the raft from level 3 before you can reach level 4, you need the ladder from level 4 in a lot of the later dungeons, you need the whistle in level 5 before you can enter level 7, and of course, you need all 8 pieces of the Triforce before you can enter Death Mountain to challenge Ganon himself. Regardless, after bombing every wall, burning every tree, and pushing every rock, you'll eventually find yourself at Spectacle Rock, wherein lies the final dungeon. Once there, you'll find what's by far the largest dungeon in the game, but see it through, and you'll fight against Ganon himself to rescue the eponymous Princess Zelda. Once you know what you're doing, it's actually a pretty short adventure. A great deal of the time sink in the original release was simply in figuring out where all the hidden entrances were. The internet wasn't a household commodity back then. This is when strategy guides and the like were just becoming a thing. Once you're familiar with the game and know where to go, you can 100% it in about 2 to 4 hours. However, once you beat the game, you also unlock the game's second quest. This is effectively a hard mode of the game with completely redesigned dungeons. Most of the entrances are in completely different locations. There's a lot less free rupees to be found on the overworld map. For the most part, enemy patterns are unchanged, with the exception of the fact that Stalfos can now shoot sword beams at you, and there's also 2 types of bubbles now. Red ones will make it to where you permanently are unable to swing your sword, while blue ones will restore your ability to do so. Most of the increased difficulty comes from the fact that you'll see strong enemies much earlier than you would in the first quest. This is actually only the second time that I've played through it in full, and it really is more difficult at the onset. This creates a strange reverse difficulty curve, as by the time you get to the endgame and are fully armed, it doesn't feel any more difficult than the first quest. That aside, do be aware that you'll also have false walls and dungeons now. You don't need to use bombs to break these, instead, just try to walk through every wall and eventually you'll find some that let you. All in all, The Legend of Zelda is certainly a title that's left its mark on history. Even among non-gamers, it's hard to find someone that hasn't at least heard of the series. The formula would continue to be refined by titles like Link to the Past and Ocarina of Time, and continued to be used as the heart of the series up until 2011 with the release of Skyward Sword. And that's not even going into the hundreds, if not thousands, of action-adventure games that were inspired by the series, such as Castlevania Symphony of the Night. However, looking solely at the original title and nothing else, disregarding its legacy, nearly 40 years later, it does admittedly feel rather clunky. It's not a bad game, but it is archaic. Its secrets aren't so much puzzles where you need to decipher clues, but rather, you're expected to just try everything and hope that something works. And frankly, that is poor game design. If you do decide to play it, and from a video game history perspective, it's absolutely essential you do, I honestly suggest just swallowing your pride and using a guide. It's a much more enjoyable experience that way, and most of the puzzles aren't really the sort that make you feel clever by figuring them out, as once again, there's not much to figure out. Its importance as a cultural milestone cannot be overstated, but all the same, it is rough around the edges. While I can't wait to share with you the heights which the series later reached, and have some major nostalgia for this one as one of the first games I ever played, I have to do my best to remove myself from such factors when reviewing a title. I'm not scoring the game as it came out in 1986, I'm scoring the game as it plays now. In conclusion, I find The Legend of Zelda to be worthy a solid, but paling in comparison to what would come later, 7.3 out of 10. If you're interested in playing The Legend of Zelda, the easiest way to do so these days is through the Nintendo Switch online service. Of course, as one of the best-selling games on the NES, it's not too expensive if you want to get it for original hardware. Sadly, the Wii, Wii U, and 3DS versions are no longer available because their digital shops have closed down. But what about you? What do you think of the original Zelda? What game do you think is the best in the series? If you have any questions, remarks, or opposing points of view, leave them in the comments down below. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and ring that bell. If you really enjoy my work, please consider funding my channel on Patreon. Until next time, farewell, fellow fanatics. Thank you again for watching. I have plenty more to share with you if you're interested. You can click up here above my head to subscribe to my channel. You can click over here on my monitor to see the most recent video that I've worked on. Or if you prefer, you can click up here to open this mysterious vault and see what video that the YouTube algorithm has picked just for you.